Hi, everybody. You're listening to Are We Caught Up Yet? Marvel Edition. It's me, Brianna. Hi. You can find us on youtube.com/SaveTheGameMedia Podcast Services. If you want to show some extra love and get early access, you can go to patreon.com/SaveTheGameMedia. You can join for even just $1. Hi, Luna. Today, I am joined by my co-host and friend, Sam, and also Luna, I guess.
So
You can't even see her. She's so cute. She looks exactly like Toothless. I have a pillow of Toothless's face, and they're twins. They be twinning.
don't get me started on How to Train Your Dragon.
You better enjoy How to Train Your Dragon, because if you don't, we're gonna have fights.
Abysmal.
You're joking, right? You have to be joshing.
Yes, and no.
Okay.
It's a good film. Terrible adaptation of the book.
Oh, I've not. Oh yes, I actually did read the very first, because it's a series, right?
Mm-hmm.
I read the very first book, and you're right.
That I hold
It's
very near and dear
nothing
to my
like the
heart.
book.
Because Toothless is meant to be a tiny little green thing with no teeth. Not some legendary mythic killing machine black dragon.
But he's really cute.
Hiccup doesn't lose a leg.
Well,
Stupid nonsense.
Sometimes that stuff happens. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it was their interpretation. They're like, this has to mean that he lost a leg.
These actual illustrations of a tiny green dragon.
Yeah.
They must mean
Black
a
dragon with green
gigantic
eyes.
black one.
Yeah. That has to be it. Honestly, one of my favorite things, she's actually been on a couple of different shows, but my friend Giselle, one of my best friends from college, one time I messed up and I had called How to Train Your Dragon a Pixar film. Which, it's like, okay, yeah, silly mistake, right? They're all like kind of similar companies, whatever, right? She got so unreasonably mad that for the rest of college, I'd be like, that would be my running joke is I would be like, oh, what's your guys' favorite Pixar film? And I would ask a whole group of people, and then I'd be like, mine's How to Train Your Dragon. Because she would get so mad every time. She'd be like, Brianna, I told you, it's not a Pixar film. And one time, I even made a poster. Instead of having the DreamWorks logo, it had the Pixar logo. This is what we do with our time when we're college students and have no free time.
Yeah.
So, I'm very fond of that film for many reasons, but that's one of them for sure. All right, before we get started on Guardians Volume 2, how are you and what have you been watching?
Tired, very busy, usual.
Yeah.
Don't need to delve into that.
Did you get sleep last night? I know you said you had only gotten like 4 hours the night before or something like
more,
that.
but not much.
Okay, well, more than 4 is good. I'm at 5, so.
Yeah. I am nearly finished with Ahsoka. Me and my dad have one more episode to go of that.
How is it?
Thoroughly enjoying it.
Good.
One of the better Star Wars Disney Plus shows.
Better or worse than Mando?
Depends on which season of Mando you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I've never seen a single episode, so.
I mean, Andor is at the top. Just because it's the kind of stuff, it's the grittier stuff that I like.
Of course.
I mean, Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars film, which is a hot take for some, and like
that is a really hot take.
But yeah, Rogue One is like the best Star Wars film.
Speaking of,
certainly since Disney acquired Star Wars. But anyway, yeah. So like Ahsoka's up there. I might put like Mando season 2 just below Andor, and then maybe Ahsoka. So it's pretty high. It's good. Hope they stick the landing. One more episode to go. And then the only other thing I've watched this week is the first episode of Loki season 2.
Oh, I'm so jealous that you're watching that.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll
And
see a bunch of edits from the thirsty TikTok people. So
you almost certainly will. It's fantastic thus far. Obviously,
that's
I'll
good.
reserve fully talking about it because one, spoilers for you and for people listening, I guess, and also we'll be covering it at some point anyway. But yeah, it's continuing the trend of the first series. Yeah, and all I'm going to say, MVP, Kiki Kwan.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Random. But because you were talking about Rogue One, obviously my brain went to the Rogue One, Gary Whitta. Did you see he has like a new book that came out last month?
Gundog.
Yeah. Have you read it? Just curious. Not that
No,
you have time to read, but
no. Well, I mean, technically, I do
getting
have
good
time to read. I
reviews.
am currently reading a book, but
Oh, what are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading. I can't remember the title, so I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm gonna have to go get it.
Dang. What is it?
Oh
Like
yeah,
really
of
long
course. I
ones?
don't know why that didn't keep in my head. I'm reading American Prometheus, which is the sort of biography on Oppenheimer.
Oh, how's that? That looks like a really big book.
It is a very big book. But it's got it. Don't worry, it's got it does have some pictures in it.
Ah, okay. So
You know,
basically, you're reading a picture book.
yeah. There's some coloring in there as well, just to keep me entertained. It's a very dry book, but that's what I was expecting, and it's what I like.
You like
Not
dry books?
well, I mean, not from like reading in general, but for what like because this is. I mean, this is obviously in response to me seeing the film
Ah, okay, okay.
Oppenheimer, and finding the man depicted in the film very interesting, and wanting to learn about the actual real run of events, which is pretty much the film anyway, but just to get a bit more deeper insight into his psychology and how what he did with the Manhattan Project, how that affected him.
Okay.
So there's just a lot of names, a lot of terminology, a lot of this committee met with this committee and discussed this thing, lots of dates and jargon. But I wouldn't want it to be like not a fictionalized thing, but I don't want it to be a
Like a dramatized
heavily
version.
yeah.
Okay,
I
that
don't
makes
want to
sense.
be reading it like a story. I want to read it like step by step. This is how his life played out, which
Yeah.
is what a biography is. But you know what I mean. I want it to be as dry as possible because it's obviously very tough subject material, really. And I said it before, but the film is probably going to end up being my favorite film of all time. Because I love stuff that challenges me and makes me think. And some of the stuff posed in that film, and obviously to him in real life as the real person he was, I found it extremely compelling. So
Yeah.
I was like, I have to read it.
Interesting. I didn't know that you not that didn't know that you read in general, not that you couldn't read.
Yeah, I can't
To
read.
clarify.
Yeah, hence the pictures.
One of my friends in college, he had this running bit that he would always like say he couldn't read at every given opportunity. His name was he had a different name, but we called him Nutmeg because he told us his name was Nutmeg. He was a really bizarre person.
Yeah, you don't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that his real name was like his real name was Sterling. So Nutmeg
I mean,
versus
that was
Sterling
further
is
afield than I was expecting, but still.
Anyway, so yeah, he would always like just randomly, I can't read. was like, oh, okay.
I can
So
sense that getting annoying very quickly.
it actually wasn't. He was really good at comedic timing. So I'm not good at it, but he was. So
Yeah.
okay. What have I been watching? Oh, I watched so I went to the Leica exhibit while I was in Washington. And so I wanted to watch Missing Link because it's being removed from Netflix in the US. So I watched Missing Link for the first time. That was really good. And then
Is
I
that the
watched
animated thing about the Sasquatch?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was pretty good.
Huh?
Leica films are really cool.
Yeah.
Seeing all that stuff, like, because I saw a bunch of that stuff in person too, like the sets and stuff like that. It was, anyways, it was cool. And then I watched all of season 1 of Sex Education,
Mm.
um, which
For the
was
first
good.
time, or
Yeah, I've never seen any Sex
interesting.
Education. Yeah, my bestie said, "Brianna, I think you'd like this show." I said, "Okay,"
It's
and
a
then
good show.
I started watching it on the big TV, which I never watch anything on the big TV, and let me tell you, that was a mistake. I was
Depends on
like, "Well,
perspective, I suppose.
this is going on the iPad with headphones."
Mm. I mean, I
So,
don't know what you expected.
not a sex scene.
Sorry, what's the first word of the show again?
Sex education, not lots of sex.
But I'm sure you could infer that it's probably
I really
heavily.
couldn't. I'm not telling you. I'm not joking. Like, I'm telling you, it shocked me.
Yeah. That's why you're disappointed that Ted Lasso didn't have any cowboys.
What does Ted Lasso have to do with cowboys?
Lasso.
Also, Ted. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Ted Lasso is genuinely one of my favorite shows of all time.
It's all right. People are allowed to have wrong opinions. It's fine.
We will have words later.
It's obviously a bit because I haven't even seen it. So it's like, you know,
Listen.
I can't tell you you're
Okay.
wrong when I don't know what it is you're talking about. I mean, I know
Roy
what you're
Kent,
talking about, but
the guy who plays Roy Kent, 1, really funny, 2, really attractive. What more do you
Roy
need?
Kent.
Yeah.
I'm going to
What's
Google
his
him.
What's his real name? Brett Goldstein. He
Oh.
is so handsome. And there's
Just
also a guy in there
Google.
named Sam. His name's Sam Obisanya.
Horrific looking. Yeah.
He's really attractive as well. So.
Brett Goldstein.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen him
Yep.
before. I can't remember where.
I have never seen him before. I have, like, a lot of these actors are like actors that just like didn't exist to me until this show.
Yeah.
So, which was interesting. It made the show feel weirdly more real because I'd never like seen any of these people before. Oh, he's in Thor: Love and Thunder.
You just spoiled yourself for the future, Bree.
I was looking at his filmography.
Clearly. Not sure you plucked that out of a future timeline that you just shot into.
Listen. I
You'll
don't
probably
really care
forget by
about
the
spoiler.
time. You'll forget by the time we get there.
That is
It's
really
still
true,
quite
and
a
I'll
long
be
way
like,
away.
"Oh my god, you guys, look who it is! It's Roy Kent."
I never would have known.
That does sound like me. Okay. Have I watched anything else? I don't think so. I think that's I mean, I have been watching random stuff like Brooklyn Nine-Nine because I've never seen that all the way through.
Mm,
And also it's something easy to watch while I work. I
yeah.
also started watching that one show, House of Cards again, but
Oh, yeah.
like only like a half an episode and then I was like, okay, that was enough. Because he got mad at he got mad at like the main dude that helps him with everything. And I was like really upset
Yeah. Poor
because I
Doug.
was like, he does everything for you and he's so
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
So I got really frustrated and I was like, okay, that was enough. So, and lots of anime, obviously. I won't
Go for
talk
it,
about
Sam.
anime, but seriously, if you guys like anime at all, or even if you don't like anime, Frieren is one of the most profound shows I think I've ever watched in my entire life, and I would be surprised if it doesn't end up in as one of my favorite anime of all time by the time it's done. It is so good. Sam, it's the story of like the hero's party after, like, so the whole thing is like hero's party has beat the demon king. Now what happens kind of thing?
You might as well be speaking French to me. I know what none of this means.
So like the trope of like, oh, the hero, like the hero's group, like it's like it's like a high fantasy thing where it's like you gather a group of people, there's like the
I mean, I
hero, the
can
mage, all that
deduce
stuff.
what the
Right.
sentiment is.
Right. So they beat the demon king, and the very start of the anime is them coming home from beating the demon king and stopping the world from ending. And basically one of the party members is an elf, and the rest of them are like there's a dwarf and two humans, and so they have like a much shorter lifespan than her.
Yeah, and they're all racist. They're all like, we hate elves.
No,
Get out of here.
that doesn't happen at all. It's a very cozy anime, but it's very sad. It's very, very sad. I have cried like several times watching it. One time was like full sobbing because I'm a baby. It's really good. Anyways. Okay. Well, general thoughts on Guardians Volume 2. You know I'm high on life after watching that. I was like, yes. More comedy. I really liked
After
Guardians
watching what?
2.
Sorry?
Guardians 2. Guardians
You're high on
Volume
life
2.
after watching it.
Yeah, I liked it.
No, you liked it.
Yeah. I didn't like the sad parts, but I liked the rest of the parts.
That's a deeply profound thoughts that you've shared there. You were
We're
happy
just
at the
giving
happy
general
parts
thoughts.
and sad at the sad parts.
Yeah. I'm here for
This is the
nothing
kind of
if not.
content people come here for, you know?
I know they do.
That level of
If
insight
if
is
anybody is here this long and has been watching the podcast this long, they know that I'm crazy. So
that's your whole general thoughts. Just liked it.
yeah, I loved it.
Oh, and see, now you've gone to love it. We were at like, and now you're at love it.
No, I said I was high on life.
So which
That
one
was
is
the
it? Do you
first
like
thing.
it or do you
Oh
love
my
it?
god.
Because those are two different things.
What did you think of the film?
Wow, just no answers to the questions.
Yep, deflecting.
Yeah, I really like this film. General consensus from a lot of people is that the first Guardians is better than the second. I just don't see that at all. I get that like the first Guardians holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts because it was the new fresh thing at the time and it was unlike anything we'd really seen before. But I think on pretty much every level, Volume 2 has it beat, whether we're talking about overall narrative arc, themes, character development, villain, soundtrack. I think
Acting skills.
I
think
I
they
don't know
got
that.
better.
I mean, it's kind of like the same as anything really, where they ease more into the character the more times they play them and the more time they spend with them. I don't know that anyone was necessarily bad in part one.
Ooh, I did have a hard time with Drax. I remember specifically talking about that. But then we had like a
is
whole
that
thing.
what I can't remember what I don't know how much we got into that. Was that because of what his character was like, or you actually had a problem with the acting itself?
we did have this discussion, and if I remember correctly, I had a problem with the acting itself where I said, like, I recognize that, like, this is a good role for him to play, like, not being as, like, seasoned of an actor as some
Mm.
of the others, and so, like, I think that he's doing a good job in the role, but I still think that there were some issues where he wasn't quite settled into the role almost is what it felt like, I think.
Sure.
But I think he, like, really knocked it out of the park this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, just surface level, everybody was not necessarily fully on their A game the whole time, but really bringing it.
Yeah.
I think visually it's more interesting as well. Yeah, I think it's a film that is often overlooked and underrated when it comes to sort of general rankings of all the films thus far.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
honestly, now that you're saying it was, like, visually interesting, maybe I should have watched it visually.
you're trying to rile me out,
Mm,
and it's not working because I
okay.
know you watched it.
I did actually watch it because I ate dinner. That I found the trick if I eat food,
See, there we go. There we go. That's the trick.
and then I can't
Um,
crochet because I'm using my hands for food.
yeah, I mean, like as we sort of transition out of general thoughts, I'll just share this thing here.
Mhm.
When James Gunn, who writes and directs these films, obviously, when he came on and did the first Guardians, obviously, well, not obviously. I only say obviously because I've known this information for so long, but I don't know how actually like mainstream it is. I'm sure it wouldn't have crossed your path necessarily. But it was quite well known that most people thought that the Guardians was going to fail, that it was going to be Marvel's first real like hard flop. Obviously that didn't happen. The first film came out and was super successful and sort of, as we said when we talked about it a few weeks ago, sort of reinvigorated some people's passion for the MCU,
Mhm.
gave them something different or different enough. And he was then almost immediately sort of brought in for discussions about like, because Kevin Feige is the top dog of the MCU, right? He's the sole main producer. He produces all of the stuff,
Mhm.
and he
Took
like has
everything in
final
me to not
creative say.
bark there.
Yeah, he has final creative say and everything. So he's like God when it comes to the MCU.
Right.
After First Guardians, Kevin was like, "Hey James, you want to help me like co-run this thing?"
Mm.
Because everyone was so impressed with how Guardians performed and also just how like well made it was as a film. You know, introducing that many new characters all at once, having them all be relatively compelling to different degrees, having it stylistically be very distinct. And also, we hadn't really had anything space based in the MCU at that point. So it was like a brand new corner of the universe that was now open for
Mhm.
further exploration. So he was like considered for it, and he did have active input in a lot of films between Guardians 1 and Guardians 2, like creatively, not necessarily like actively changing stuff, but he was consulted. Guardians 2 is the film that makes me upset that that never actually really came to fruition, because I've said it before, but the thing I love most about the MCU is the characters and how, you know, there can be big introductory moments for characters and others can be incredibly subtle and they only become major players later down the line, and it makes it feel very multi-layered and quite real, as silly as that sounds to say. And Guardians, you know, without going into spoilers just yet, does things with a lot of secondary characters from the first film and makes them like some of my favorites
Mm.
of the entire squad or, you know, ensemble or whatever. And if that was something that was applied globally across all of these Marvel films, I think it would be such, not that it isn't nuanced, but it would be, I think, way more interesting. Because James Gunn, and he's replicated this when he's transitioned over to DC now, he focuses a lot on the more obscure, weird characters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy were unheard of before the film, really. They were like
Yeah.
a C or D tier team. And he brought them up to the spotlight. And he's doing that with most characters that he's working on. So to give a huge amount of screen time and spotlight and value to characters that most other films might sort of turn a bit of a blind eye towards. And you'll see this in some future stuff. I'm not going to say what, but when they focus in on those characters that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to, I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
where these films and projects in general are the most interesting. So yeah, it's a very long-winded thing that I just said, but contextually, I think that's interesting that these films did so well and were so unique compared to everything else that they're surrounded by, that he almost, you know, in a parallel universe, he could have been running the ship at this point. But alas, he's not. Is that for better or for worse? I guess we'll technically never know. But I think the point I'm making is that the MCU as it exists now is worse off because it doesn't have James Gunn in it anymore.
Yeah. And I know that there was like a few controversies around this, and I don't know the timeline. So I was curious on that as well. But before we transition into that, just to kind of, so for James Gunn, he just recently left like 2 years ago, a year ago, right?
It depends, because technically he
Oh my god, he has crazy
left
hair.
probably about like 2020,
Okay.
but because of COVID and stuff, that delayed. So he technically took over for DC whilst he was still filming Volume 3. So
Okay.
like he was kind of like there was an interstitial period where he was technically doing both, and couldn't like fully walk out the door until he'd obviously finished promoting Volume 3.
Right. Makes sense.
So yeah, like if you're talking officially, he's fully done with the MCU. Early, when did Guardians 3 come out?
This year.
This year. Yeah, May 5th. Yeah. So that was when he was officially done.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there are several controversies that I remember, and I don't know what the timeline is. I remember there was one controversy where there was like an issue with Twitter. Somebody had tweeted something, and I think it was James Gunn.
Yeah.
What is the timeline of that? I'm just curious. Like, was that before this or after this, or?
No, it was not long after this. So this Guardians 2 came out in 2017, and then I think it was like middle-ish of 2018. I will remain as neutral when I'm describing this as possible, because it could descend into something. From what I remember, James Gunn, as were many people online, being heavily critical of Trump.
Okay.
And someone or a group of people, I don't know, sort of sleuthed and went way back on his Twitter timeline, and found jokes that he'd made, because James Gunn was a comedian before he got into filmmaking. Or, you know, he's probably doing both at the same time, but before he fully transitioned into being a filmmaker, he was a comedian. And some of the jokes that he had posted on Twitter and potentially other social media stuff were, to put it lightly, in poor taste.
Okay.
There was, you know, I won't obviously, I mean, I can't remember any of them, but they were like related to the Holocaust. There was some like pedophilia stuff in
Oh
there,
god.
and you very clearly jokes, but obviously, you know, um, as we've gotten further and further to present day, people have become more sensitive, rightly and wrongly so, in certain situations, and people just decided to run with that.
Yeah.
And obviously,
I do
because of
remember
his
that.
criticism of Trump, they were like, "We're going to use this as ammunition to try and like
Get rid of him.
cancel him," I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and particularly because of like the pedophilia jokes, obviously you can't really have that hanging around your head and work at
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah.
So they fired him, even though he came out and publicly apologized and like clarified what it was. But he says, it doesn't excuse it. I was a very different person. That was ages ago. I've grown and changed, as we all do.
Yeah.
But he took responsibility. He was like, yes, they are in poor taste. Regardless, they let him go. And then I think it was the next year, so 2019, I think that's right, where Disney brought him back on to direct part three, because he had written it at that point, but it was at that point somebody else was probably going to take over directorial duties. And like all the cast had been petitioning really hard to bring him back.
Weren't there a
I
couple people that were saying like I will not continue in my role unless he comes back kind of thing?
The only person that I remember saying that was Batista
Okay.
Drax.
That's what I remember as well.
There might have been somebody else. I think maybe Vin Diesel said that as well,
Mm.
but I can't guarantee. All of them expressed, all of the main
I
guys
think Vin Diesel
expressed that
did
they
say
were,
something as well because then there were jokes of like he doesn't even say anything, so like we'll just use recordings of his voice or something
yeah.
like that. Okay.
Um, but no, he was brought back on, and obviously some people were upset about that. Other people were very happy. I was happy. For the record, I'm not afraid to say that I was glad that he got brought back on.
Yeah.
Not only
I do
because
think like people should be
context
allowed
was
to make
super important.
mistakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like he wasn't like he was like, oh, it's a joke, guys, get over it. When they
Right.
surfaced, um, he was like, yeah, it's really bad. I take responsibility. I've
Right.
changed as a person. And I'm like, well, if people do that, and it's clear because of how he is seemingly, for all intents and purposes, all we know is how he treats people on set and stuff. He seems like an actually genuinely lovely guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes, I don't like the jokes, but they're jokes. So it's like, come on.
Yeah.
And also, not to jump the gun too much, but for the end result, for him to be able to finish his trilogy,
Yeah.
and whether that worked or not, who knows? We'll see
You.
once we get to volume 3.
Okay. Thank you for the history lesson.
There you go. It's
I
very, very
remembered
interesting.
I remembered a lot of it, but not everything.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, let's see. What do we want to hit? Let's go ahead and start with soundtrack, just because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's we usually start with that, and also it's like pretty essential to Guardians. So I think it's worth specifically talking about. Am I wrong, or did they reuse some of the songs from the first movie, which is totally fine? I'm just trying to remember if like my brain. I'm trying to figure out if my brain is crazy.
Um, I'm gonna look up the track list. I don't remember there being anything.
Okay. Okay.
Not in terms of like licensed music, I don't think.
Okay. I
Obviously, in terms of the original score,
yeah.
yes, but
No, I did mean the licensed film or the licensed music. So,
let's see. No.
okay. So then I am crazy. That's fine. I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. Okay.
I am rechecking as we're talking, just so I'm not coming across as stupid.
I have never seen this person in my life.
Yeah, they're all different.
Okay, fair enough. Um, alrighty. So then for music,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that the licensed music was better this time or worse this time? I'm curious. Or equal.
This is a very interesting question, um, because, as you say, it's so essential to these films. Um, James Gunn storyboards these scenes before he shoots them to these tracks.
Right.
Um, I think the answer that I always end up on is that Volume 1, the majority of the tracks on Volume 1 are more iconic and synonymous with Guardians. But in terms of actual track list, I prefer Volume 2. So I think, like, on a wide mainstream level, most of the songs licensed on Volume 1, people would probably, if they'd heard them before and had seen Guardians 1, would recognize them more than they would a song from Volume 2 and associate it with
Mm.
Volume 2. But I think for thematic reasons, narrative reasons, and also just the way in the scenes in which some of the songs are used, I prefer Volume 2.
Okay. I think I do prefer Volume One's music, as
That's
well
fine.
as like how everything is like choreographed. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that Volume Two was bad, but I did feel like it was like a little bit more separated from the music, slightly.
Okay.
Not thematically, but like choreographed scenes. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
how they would
I
like
get
have
what
like
you.
the fight scenes and stuff like that. Like I feel like it was a little bit more separated, but
Yeah.
yeah. Um, anything else you wanted to say about the soundtrack?
Um, I mean, I agree with you in the sense that it might feel a little bit more disconnected, but on the flip side, I appreciate that at various points throughout the film, the song choices are directly acknowledged and
Yeah.
sometimes woven into the plot itself.
Yeah.
Like Peter and Ego talking about, um, Brandy, you're a fine girl and stuff, and how that links back to his mom. Without fully going there yet, at the very end where it's Cat Stevens, father and son. Um, I think that's what makes me like it more, because for Guardians 1, I remembered the music, and for Volume 2, I remembered the scene with the music. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that that's probably not that I like have I'm not far from watching the show, but I imagine that that's also how I'll remember it.
Mm.
Yeah. I think I definitely agree with that.
Mr. Blue Sky at the start.
Yeah. I did really
Not to
enjoy the
say that
very
Volume 1
beginning.
doesn't have that, but
Yeah. I did really enjoy that opening scene
yeah,
with little baby Groot. He's
Baby
so
Groot.
cute. He's very, very cute. Very
He
sassy.
is.
The beginning to the end with Groot is just great. Like especially like the teenage Groot at the post credit. That was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
So good stuff. Okay, let's see what else. Okay. Just because it's on my mind, 4 post credit scenes? That seems like excessive.
Yeah, I mean, they're quite minor though.
Yes, yes they are.
Well, I mean, two of them are quite short. and the other ones are a little bit more substance. But because like part of me, you could think like if you didn't know the timeline that it might have just been that if the overlap of the controversy and stuff was happening, James Gunn was just trying to cram as much future setup as possible so that there were
Uh-huh.
avenues to go. But obviously that there was no overlap. The controversy happened after the film was released. I just think that James himself wanted to have as many doors open to him as possible.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as trilogies often do,
Particularly
they
the Stanley.
fan out.
That was the real path that they should have taken.
The family.
No, Stanley.
Oh, Stanley.
Yeah, they should have really explored that one.
I mean, oh, hey, is that indicative of something? Who was he talking to? You know, what
That's
was
a good
going on?
question. I don't know.
Maybe it will never get touched on again.
It's a good chance.
It is because the cameos never really lead to anything. So, but yeah, like I get what you mean, but I think that it's just he wanted to fan out as much as possible. You know,
Yeah.
going from
I
a
mean,
quite narrow thing in part one into part two into part three.
yeah. I don't think that I was that bothered by how many there were. I just was shocked.
Yeah, like oh
So,
that's it. Oh, there's another one. Oh, that's it. Oh, there's another one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I was more shocked than anything.
Yeah, she's
But they
the
were all good.
golden woman is like a cocoon. It's like, well, what's going on?
I was very interested because I was like, why are these people gold?
Yeah, just how they are.
I know. And I was like, I kind of think it would be kind of fun to be like obviously it would be fun to be on the set for any of these films, but I feel like being a gold person for a little bit would be interesting.
Probably be really annoying because you get warm very quickly.
Yeah, probably. But for those few minutes that I wasn't warm,
Yeah,
I'd be having a good time.
yeah.
And then I'd be like, get me out of here.
Hmm.
um okay. Question for you. So for the mass teleportation thing that happens towards the end of the film, where they like, I think they said that they teleport like over 100. I can't remember something. They jump a bunch of times. Basically, it's not teleport. It's
Mm-hmm.
technically jump. So from that, we get to see a bunch of scenes. I'm curious. Do any of those come back? Because we saw
You
a
mean
bunch of
all the
planets.
different places that they fly past?
Uh huh. There has to be
Um,
one in there that's like
no,
referencing something. Really? Nothing?
no. I
Oh,
mean,
that's disappointing.
well, referencing something, there is something there that's referencing something, but it's not going to be picked up on. Like it's super inside baseball. Like
No.
one of the things, I don't even know if you'll remember this when I say it, but one of the things that they fly past is like two people made out of rocks fighting each other.
Uh huh.
Well, that is, I mean, that is a race of things in the comics, as far as I know. But also, if you'll remember the top tier instant classic that is Thor: The Dark World, at the very beginning of that film, he fights a big thing made of rocks and just like smashes them
Ah.
with. So it's like, hey, these things exist. Will we ever see them
Ah.
again? Who knows? Anybody's guess.
For sure. Okay.
But no, like there isn't
That's
anything
disappointing.
significant. Yeah.
They could have used something there.
Yeah. But like
Like, don't you think
James
it would
Gunn
have,
is,
especially like with Doctor Strange, it would have been interesting to like go through that, like, what's his face's world for just a moment.
but see that they're not dimension hopping. They're just that it's like a
Okay.
wormhole. They're just going through different
Okay.
points in space.
Okay.
So yeah, God, Bree, that wouldn't make sense. Jesus.
You're right, my bad.
But like I understand your point regardless of like having something in there, but I think the
Mhm.
reason that there isn't, because it would be like the perfect place to put something in.
Yeah.
James Gunn has been on the record multiple times of like, yes, obviously I know we're all part of a bigger universe, but as of right now, he wasn't really concerned about tying in lots of different stuff and having lots of, oh, you see, that's a person that I know from here.
Mhm.
Um, he liked his being a bit more standalone, you know.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be you could just watch the two Guardians films and know what was
Nothing
happening,
else.
basically.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I get
Makes
that.
sense. Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. This movie passes the Bechdel test. Can you
Hooray!
believe it?
I can because it does.
It's one of, I think this is only the what, second or third time this has happened, maybe,
Mm,
in everything that
maybe.
we've watched.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah,
Marvel are just raging misogynists, so
it's
I
true.
think that, yeah.
It's true. So at this point in time, Guardians Volume 2, who's your favorite Guardian of the Galaxy?
Rocket, and it's not even close.
Still, I assume,
Um, Still, as in from volume one, or you mean persisting into the future?
Into the Future.
I mean, that would be spoilers.
Oh my god. Ah, okay.
I can, because what if the answer was different? Then that suggests that something awesome or cool or interesting or compelling happens with a different character.
Or something bad happens with Rocket.
Well, yeah, either or. But I don't want to. I don't want to have you infer anything from what I say.
Yeah. I have to say, I at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that like Rocket is probably the best. Like he's the best written character. Like in terms of like depth and like story arc and all of that stuff. I feel like Peter and Gamora have interesting stories, and I feel like they're technically more like quote unquote main characters
Mm-hmm.
than Rocket, but I still think that like they don't, for some reason it doesn't feel like their characters are as in depth as Rocket still. And I think it's because they're like they explore Rocket's emotions a little bit more and like his emotional development as compared to the other characters. That's my theory. But I have to say I do personally really love Baby Groot. I think everybody does, but
Yeah, who can?
yeah, I think that
As Taserface says in the film, he's too adorable to kill. You know.
yeah. Dude, there are so many like gags in this, like or running jokes or bits or whatever. Like the you've got a terrible name, and then the lady answering the call as he's dying is like, "What is that name?"
Sniggering to herself. So.
Yeah, it was really good. I loved that. That was a really funny joke. Like the whole Baby Groot just like is dumb now.
Yeah, he's a
Like
baby.
I know he is a baby. He's just a baby. He's very cute.
Also, just to reiterate the point, not the same Groot as the first film. It is
Yeah,
Groot's
which is
son.
really depressing.
No, it's not.
It is really depressing.
The original Groot got to go out saving his friends, and he lives on through his son, who's adorable little baby, and a
He
sassy
is.
baby,
Well, yeah, now he's a, a teenager.
and a sassy teenager now. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Groot.
He's so cute. I love Groot. I will say like the whole like tape scene where he's like, "Can somebody get me some tape?" Like that scene went on for like way too long, but like in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
It was so good. He's like, "Did you ask her? See, I knew you were like me. Like that whole, so funny. And then he
Yeah,
pressed the right button. I'm so proud of
he
him.
did. It's got to believe in him.
Well, I think if they had
Sometimes.
reiterated several times, and the whole thing with like him like not being able to grab the right thing, like it's so funny.
Bringing the toe.
Okay, I wish that they had looped back on that. I
It's
understand that they
funnier
were
if they
like,
don't.
I think it would have been funny if like somebody woke up and was like screaming, like, "Where's my toe?" like in the background of all of that chaos.
Maybe.
I think that would have been really funny, but
Maybe.
it shall never be mentioned again. So,
No.
I can't believe he just had a toe. That was so weird. You know,
Groot
as
likes
trees
toes.
do.
Canon.
Ew. He's a foot fetish? Is that what you're telling?
Can either confirm or deny, you know? What happens in volume 3? Does it get wild? Maybe.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. What else do we want to talk about for characters? We talked about Groot. I really did like Yondu and Rocket, like their like the pairing and
Yeah.
like Rocket's like the ending realization that he's like everybody came for him. Like that, I feel like that was a lot for Rocket. It was a lot for me emotionally. You guys know how I am.
Yeah.
I didn't cry, but I thought about it. I was like, dang, that's really
Not
sad.
only do I think that the Yondu and Rocket pairing is inspired and handled very well in this film, I also think it's the best part of the film. And as you mentioned it specifically, I think that the ending to this film is probably one of the best in the entire franchise because it's incredibly understated, but there is so much going on. Like a lot of people, you know, they're like, "Oh yeah, Yondu's dead. That's sad." You know, Rocket cries, but they don't really think beyond that. They're like, "Wait, Rocket's crying. Like that's not something Rocket does." And I mean, you mentioned the line of, you know, they showed up. You know, they came. Everybody came for Yondu, and how earlier in the film you have the Yondu argument with Rocket, where it's like, I know who you are because you're me. How they both appear to be abrasive a-holes because it's a defense mechanism, you know, to keep everybody at more than arm's length because they're scared about what will happen to the people and what will happen to them if they let anybody get too close. Like I always say it because it sounds so stupid when you say it out loud, but for Marvel to be able to make me care this much about a CGI raccoon, you know, like
CGI
there's got to
trash
be good
panda.
storytelling going on there if they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, going back to before the first Guardians film came out, they were like, wait, there's a talking tree and a raccoon as
Mm-hmm.
main characters. Yep, not sure about this one, but they're scene stealers and they're probably the best characters that have been introduced thus far.
Mm.
I think it's so powerful because it speaks volumes to Rocket as a character without even really saying all that much. You know,
Yeah.
like the final interaction between Rocket and Quill is, you know, they came and Quill was like, they did. And it's like, even though, um, even though he stole batteries, they don't need. Which is obviously in reference to himself from the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
the film,
Yeah.
not to Yondu. And Quill just sort of like hangs on a look at Rocket, realizing what Rocket is implying to himself. And he's like, well, of course, you know. And it's the realization for Rocket that what he's doing isn't working, and it wouldn't even matter if it did, because the people that love you will love you, unconditionally, um, and will love you despite your flaws. And
Mhm.
Rocket is an incredibly flawed creature, um, and he thinks that that makes him unworthy of love.
Mhm.
But that's just categorically untrue. It's honestly, it's the ending that I point people back to the most. If I'm like, if you actually consider what this ending is, don't just
Mhm.
watch it surface level. If you consider what it means and what is being inferred, and again, Cat Stevens' Father and Son, that song playing, listening to the lyrics of that song, what that song means, it's incredibly powerful stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think like they're pretty consistent with Rocket because right, like his whole thing is that he doesn't know what he is. Like technically like he's like a raccoon or whatever, but he's not a raccoon,
But
right?
he
He's
is.
just exactly.
But I
So,
think I think that, like, sorry to
no,
jump
you're
in, but
okay.
I think just the point is, and you might have been making this. I apologize if you are, um, but it's Rocket probably does know that he's a raccoon, but he is running from who he is emotionally.
Right.
You know, like he doesn't want to accept what and who he is,
Mhm.
because throughout the film it's inferred that he's been through a lot of trauma and has experienced a lot of things. In the first film, you see he's got all that hardware like jammed into his back. Um, so yeah, I think he's one of the most interesting characters in the franchise, personally.
Yeah.
Um, I completely interrupted your point.
No, that was the point I was going to make, and you said it much more eloquently than
God
I would
damn
have.
it!
So,
I apologize.
no need. Um, okay. What else do we want to talk about? Okay, they just threw in a bunch of like really interesting actors here, by the way, like Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell. Like, what was
Hmm.
happening? They were just
Yeah,
like, hey, really famous person. Did you want to be in this movie? And they were like, yeah.
yeah.
And aren't you so
Um,
proud of them? They didn't just throw in a really famous actor and just like throw him away. I mean, technically, Ego's gone, but they used him well, I
they
think.
did.
So, proud moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, you would think I would, but I'm actually not sure on the interpersonal dynamics of what's going on. But James Gunn is one of those filmmakers who will repeatedly use actors that he's friends
Mhm.
with. So it could be that he already had some kind of relationship with someone like Stallone before this film, because he has used Stallone in subsequent films. Like he was in the Suicide Squad and stuff like that
Mm.
at DC. Um, but yeah, like I don't know, or maybe it is just that the first Guardians was so well received that you know people like that reached out and were like, I'd love to be a part of this, and to whatever degree, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I like that everybody is used well in the capacities
Mhm.
that they are involved in the film in, and that none of them are like trying to steal scenes. At least in terms of like the actors that have the smaller side parts, like Stallone. Like he isn't. I don't think he's chewing the scenery necessarily. I don't rate him that much as an actor,
Yeah.
but I think that for the role that he had, it was like, yeah, okay, you fit the part well, I suppose, like a gruff
I
leader
thought
of,
it was great.
yeah.
I thought that was a great moment. I thought he
Mm.
was used really well. Um, yeah. And I really did like the reflection of like I guess Stakar to Yondu. and then Yondu to Peter Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Like that reflection of like Stakar helped Yondu, Yondu helped Peter, although Stakar didn't know that he was helping him.
And Peter didn't know that Yondu was helping him.
Yeah. I had a suspicion when they like when I heard the story the first time, I was like, well, this sounds like an excuse. But then when you hear Yondu tell the story the exact same way that Peter does, like literally almost word for word, it's like, oh, okay, so Peter's heard this excuse a million times. So this is for
Yeah.
sure just made up. And then of
Yeah.
course you get the confirmation of like, of course it was never about that. So I'm also
What?
a little go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was gonna go to a different point. So if you were gonna keep talking about
As
that.
was I. So please
Okay.
make your point first.
So I was just gonna say, Yondu, I really enjoy his power. I don't know if power is the right word because it seems to be a little bit more technology.
His gimmick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His whole thing with the arrow. I think that's so interesting. He was really strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like really,
Overpowered,
really
some might say.
strong. Yeah. Is that why he had to die? Probably. That's what happens with
No, I
overpowered
mean,
characters.
like technically, I guess yes, you can't have that kind of player on the board for too long.
Yeah.
But I think, like narratively, it made sense here for Yondu to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it did
So
for sure.
yeah,
Although I would have liked having him around. Anyways,
of course.
I really hope that they bring that back. I don't know if they're gonna like bring back his like crew member as the person that does that, but it's such a cool power.
I mean, he was practicing with it as one of the post credits.
And did a terrible job with it. Just
We
stabbed
never saw Yondu
trash.
get started. Maybe Yondu was like that, stabbing people
Maybe.
in the shoulder.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But
Well, I mean, that's sort of what I was. The whole Yondu thing is kind of what I was inferring at the very beginning, in the spoiler-free bit of leveling up secondary characters. Like, what a turnaround
uh-huh.
for Yondu. Like, Yondu was great in the first film, very funny and stuff. A little bit of an antagonistic force,
Yeah.
but for him to do the 180 here, to still be like a bit of a knob, but you peel back the layers and you see that he really does care about Peter, and he's trying to empathize with Rocket, and obviously then sacrificing himself. It's like probably one of, if not the best character in the film besides Rocket. Which is it's absurd. Like, you don't typically see that, I don't think, from the first film to a sequel.
Yeah.
Not to this degree anyway, for sure. So
Yeah. But it all is still in line with this character, like from the first
absolutely.
film as well, which is, I think, awesome.
Yeah.
I think that they did a good job of like reflecting that.
Mary Poppins, what a legendary moment.
I did really enjoy that. I was like, well, no one else is there to tell him any, otherwise. So I guess, yep.
Yeah. He doesn't know who Mary Poppins is, so it's like,
Yeah.
if Peter tells him he looks like Mary Poppins, he's going to take that as a compliment.
I also love that they didn't say anything about the trinkets. Like they just got him a bunch of trinkets at the end.
Yeah. He loved them from the first one.
I guess like technically at the very end he's like, oh, he was saving this for you, and that was technically a trinket. But you know what I mean. Like,
yeah,
it was
the
just like
actual,
something that carry over
stuff
from the first film without like being spoken. So that was good. Do you want to say anything about like Gamora and Nebula and that whole thing? I don't really. I did like the line that was like, "All I wanted was a sister."
Yeah.
And then like Gamora coming back around on it and like, "Hey, like I was just trying to survive, and I was a kid." I like that.
I think it's interesting. Like, we don't really have that many sisters in the MCU to this day, so it's sort of like, I think that's a dynamic that I wish was investigated more, particularly because of how clearly volatile this one is. for various reasons. Nebula is a very divisive character. A lot of people just don't like her because she's incredibly abrasive. She speaks relatively monotonously. Um, and I think that they just don't they haven't quite figured out at this point anyway. I'm not saying that they have in the future, but like where we are now, they certainly haven't figured out really what to do with her as a character, as opposed to just being someone that is angry at Gamora because Gamora is better than her, you know. She's just got like a permanent chip on her shoulder, and some people are like that, but that can come across as incredibly annoying to a lot of people, which it has.
Yeah.
But that being said, I still like that there is a dynamic between them, even if it's not really fully capitalized on in any meaningful way. Um, but I mean, I'd agree with you with what you said earlier that obviously not the Peter side necessarily, but the Gamora in this conversation side, that not that she's a nothing character, because she certainly is a character, but it is, the characters are in a lane and they stick to that lane very
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much flexibility. Obviously, she's a bit more open to the idea of, you know, found family in this one, and
Mm-hmm.
compassion for Peter. But yeah, I feel like that if there was just a little bit more give and take and shifting, it could be a bit more compelling. But I don't have issues with any of it necessarily.
Yeah, for sure. I I think it's interesting, like to your earlier point, that like she almost has become a side character, even though we technically know that she's a main character. Whereas like the
Mm-hmm.
side characters almost became main characters kind of thing.
Yeah.
So interesting. I don't think I have anything else to say about that relationship or
No.
really Nebula. Anything you want to say about Mantis?
So
I
good.
she was a really good character. I liked her. I hope she comes back again, even if it's just for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, she just brings a bit of, not that the team itself isn't like bouncy and light, because it is a lot of the time,
Just
but
fresh, bouncy.
yeah, and a bit of a new dynamic, and obviously an interesting power. But um, yeah, no, I think, you know, speaking of scenes that I love and kind of go overlook, I think that one of the most interesting and often powerful scenes is where Mantis is sat out on the steps with Drax. Um, and, you know, there's the whole gag about, you know, you're ugly, you know, you're horrific to look at and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's all very fun, the dynamic between the two of them, because Drax is aggressively blunt and
Yeah.
literal, and Mantis is naive and she's not experienced in socializing. Um, but I think, you know, Drax starts, I can't remember how they get to the conversation, but Drax starts talking about his family, you know, his wife and daughter.
It's the lake. He said that looks like a lake that I once took my
That's it.
daughter to.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he starts talking about them and sort of reminiscing, because obviously they're dead. You know, Thanos killed them.
Whoa. Spoilers. Just
I
kidding.
mean, it's mentioned
Just
in the
kidding.
first film and in this one. But he starts talking about them, and, you know, is composed, and he's sort of smiling just a little bit, you know, as you would if you're reminiscing on a good time. But then, you know, Mantis goes to touch him to feel his emotion, and she sort of breaks down crying, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And while she's doing that, Drax is still just sort of contemplatively looking out
Mm-hmm.
at the view. And again, speaking of things that where it says so much without really saying anything,
Yeah.
I think that that gives a massive insight to Drax and who he is and the strength that he must have.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously he's in like that would infer like he's in so much pain.
Hmm.
at all times. Like that's just like his base state kind of
Yeah,
thing.
which makes sense, but it's just that we don't ever see it
Yeah.
because he is often the comic relief in most scenes.
Yeah. It's
But to
like
know
you're
that that is,
disgusting.
yeah, I'm imagining being with you physically. Um, yeah, like I think that just even if I'm not saying it is or isn't, but even if it was never touched upon again, the fact that that has been established as an element of his character, I think if you are able to keep that in mind, it makes him not super compelling necessarily, but far more compelling of a character.
Yeah.
Um, because almost any interaction he has, past and future, sort of is somewhat recontextualized,
Uh-huh. I agree.
and can inform a lot of potentially the decisions that he makes. You know, he
Mhm.
came across, I mean, he always comes across as an idiot, but you know, in the first film when he calls Ronin and his goons, you know, to and sort of gets into the fight and almost gets killed and stuff, you're like, why the hell would he do that? But then you sort of, with
Yeah.
this in kind of information, you get it because he says, you know, you killed my wife and daughter and stuff. But with this, it's like
Mhm.
the rage that must be seething inside of him. You can understand why he might be that kind of impulsive, making stupid decisions as anybody would when they're that angry
Yeah, you
and
also get
upset.
another moment with him, specifically in relation to his wife, where he's like, there's people that dance and there's people that don't. And then
Mm-hmm.
he like talks about how his wife was the only one that didn't dance and she would never dance, that kind of thing.
It makes my nether
So,
regions engorge.
oh, that's so
He's
gross.
so good. He's great.
That is so gross.
Yeah.
He says it so matter of factly though. Like if anybody else were to say that, like
That's
no
what makes him
context,
great.
it would be really awful. But it was just like, he's just being so literal.
It's it's
But
it's Drax behavior, you know. It's
yeah,
what we expect from him, and when he serves and delivers it, it's nothing but
they
entertaining. So
they really push the line with his character though. Like, and kudos to them for like not going over that line. But man, they are right on that line. So,
yeah.
anyways, is there okay? Last piece here for characters. I would say like Peter and his father, Ego, which obviously is a highly appropriate name.
Hmm.
Do you believe that he actually did love his mother? Because I don't think he did.
I mean, I think he did, but it's kind of like how he contextualizes it um, in the film. You know, where it's sort of like it's more of like a pet thing. You know, which
Mm,
obviously isn't the same as actual love, but I think he did like care about Meredith, um, but obviously not enough,
yeah.
or not in the ways that mattered.
I would almost argue that he didn't. I think he just thought he did.
Potentially, I
But
think I think it's left purposely quite vague because I think if we'd seen contextual information that reflected one of Ego's other relationships with
right.
someone else of a different species, you know, when he was trying
Uh-huh.
to make a child, if
Okay.
that had had a completely different dynamic or a similar dynamic, we could have inferred something either which way there.
Yeah.
But because we don't get that, and it's like, well, we do know that he went back multiple times for Meredith. They look like they were having a great time. You know, Meredith obviously very clearly loved him. So I like that answer isn't quite given.
Yeah, I
Um,
I definitely agree. I don't need the answer, but
yeah.
that would be my answer, is that he
Hmm.
probably didn't.
The
And
likely answer is he probably didn't. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I mean, you know, look at the way he treated his offspring when they failed him. So
Hmm. Well, do you want to say anything else about any of the characters or themes or story to the movie? Just any other things that we didn't touch on?
Um, when I first watched this film, I was kind of disappointed that they gave Peter these powers and then took them away.
I was as
Um,
well. Just say.
yeah, but on reflection, I think if Peter had those kind of crazy powers, it would have like fundamentally changed who he is and what he brings as a character.
That is true.
Like, I Peter Quill works best when he is the goofy guy stumbling around that is still incredibly fallible and can't do everything, and is often, when he tries to do something, it's messy and
Yeah.
goes wrong. And that inherently brings with it, stakes and risk, that
Mhm.
he isn't invulnerable or anything. He hasn't got superpowers. He's just got, blasters and misplaced sense of charm. Um, so like, I liked that he had them and they look cool and the implications were cool. Um, but I think that it was ultimately the right choice to strip them, because again, it kind of like goes back to the themes of the film of found family.
Mhm.
You know, he could have stayed with Ego or let Ego live or whatnot, and kept the powers, but he chose to sacrifice all of that potential and that strength for the people that he realized truly mattered,
Mhm.
that truly cared about him, because Ego didn't care about him.
Yeah.
Quill was just a means to an end. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of people don't like, because I mean, I guess it's technically a spoiler, but also not. He doesn't have any of these powers going forward. Um, but I think that that was the right call ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I haven't seen anything past this, so I can't say if I would feel the same way or not, but I feel like I am a bit concerned. I'm sure it'll be totally fine, but I am at this point in time a bit concerned how Peter is going to stand with the other Avengers, because obviously he's going to be part of, like, even if he's not an Avenger, he's going to be part of that group at some point.
Hmm.
And it feels like, not that he's not strong, but he just doesn't have anything really in comparison to everybody else.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
certainly not in terms of like abilities, but I think that
Yeah.
he is. It's going to sound stupid when I say it, but I think you'll understand my implication. He is a bit of a strategist.
Right.
He's very much a, this comes with its whole potential heap and barrel of trouble, but he's like a bit of a ladies' man, um, which could come in handy at some point. You don't know. And I think the main thing is that he's a leader of
Yeah.
his group. Um, they will listen to him most of the time, um, and his knowledge of space.
Yeah.
I think that's outside of like abilities, because I think he is relatively outmatched by most other people, outside of maybe like a Hawkeye or a Black Widow. Um, but his knowledge and his expertise and his smarm, uh, what he brings to the table, I think.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how he'll mesh. I'm sure it'll be great, but I do
Maybe it
have
won't
some
be.
reservations about it. So
Maybe he sucks.
maybe.
Who knows?
Um Again, you.
That's true.
I don't know how many times I have to say it.
I'm just going to keep saying who knows.
Okay. Any other themes or anything that you wanted to discuss on this? I do have one final question. We do still have to do the ranking, but
Okay. I I don't think so. I
okay.
think most of the important things I've touched on.
Okay. So the planet that is Ego.
Mm.
Very beautiful, right? Very, very pretty visually planet,
Hmm.
right? Including like the first part where they're like, oh, look at these like rainbow bubbles. When you pop them, they like turn into a bunch of bubbles, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are those thought bubbles or are they farts?
I see you're asking the real questions here.
I need to know.
I can categorically, wholeheartedly say I have never once, even for a split second, considered what they are, or much less for them to be either of the two things that you just said.
You see, this is what I bring to the table.
If I had to put like a genuine assumption, I would probably say that not farts, but like um natural gases being expelled from within the planet.
Yeah.
That would be my assumption.
My assumption is that they're thought bubbles.
Or I do quite like that, but I
Thank
mean,
you.
what's the implication of popping them? You know, what does that mean? Um,
You lose your train of thought.
hey, maybe that's why Ego goes off the deep end.
Mm-hmm. They
Who knows?
popped his thought.
It was all Drax's fault. Um, or it could just be visually looks kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that's probably what it is, but I
That's
like
probably is what it is.
I like thinking about this. So, what can I say?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have anything missing from the through line? I don't think there's a lot of through line here.
No.
Okay.
No. No.
Okay. Okay, so ranking list, before you even say it, do you want me to read the top 5 or like below?
Give me the top 5.
Okay. Civil War, Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, Doctor Strange, then Avengers. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is 6.
Okay. So Civil War is 1,
Then Winter Soldier.
then Winter Soldier. Guardians 2 goes in number 2 spot.
Above Winter Soldier. Okay.
Yeah.
We actually have it in the same position. Although the films around are wildly different.
Isn't Ant-Man your number 1 currently?
No, Doctor
No?
Strange is.
Oh yeah, of course it is. Of course. Where's Ant-Man?
4.
4.
Yeah, so
Why
it's
did I think
Doctor
Ant-Man was number 1?
because
I
I
don't know.
really loved it.
I do. That's probably it. I just remember you
Yeah.
saying you really enjoyed it.
I really loved it.
Yeah.
It took a lot for me to put it under Guardians Volume 1.
That's fine.
But
If you want
so
to
it's
bring it up, you can.
right now right now it's Doctor Strange, then Volume 2, then Volume 1, then Ant-Man, then Civil War.
Okay.
Which I'm glad that that's moving out of my top. Hopefully it gets out of the top 5.
Disgusting. Disgraceful.
Okay, what's next?
Spider-Man.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Spider-Man is next, y'all. No Way Home.
God, don't jump the gun. That's much further down the line.
Dang it.
No, it's Spider-Man Homecoming.
Dang it. I was hoping.
You're getting confused because all of the titles have the word home in them.
Did they do that on purpose?
Yes.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, they're just coincidence, and then they look back after the third film.
They're like, whoops,
what have
did
we
you guys
done?
notice that we did this? How funny would that be?
Pretty funny.
It would be really funny. And we would never know either. Did
Well,
you
unless they
see?
came out and said something.
Okay, this is tangential. I'll make it quick. Did you see what I named the Doctor Strange review episode?
I don't think I have.
I named it Mr. Doctor and the Power of Believing.
See,
That's
inside
funny.
baseball, I like it. These are good references.
Yeah, and then the description said this week, Sam and Brianna have come to bargain.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Thank you.
Concise, but if you know, you know.
Uh-huh. They're usually really concise because I'm lazy.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I do the same. So
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Special shout out to our current patrons. We have Bucky Blue, Amon, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Brianna's wife, Nikolai at Night, Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill, Lillian, Mimi J, The Stack Network, David Hotright, Dave Harp, the Xbox Expansion Pass, Alpaca Tom, and Lee Navarro. Thank you guys so much for your support. You can also be added to this list for $1 on our Patreon. So, if you want to, you don't have to, but we would enjoy that because then we're one person closer to being to 1,000 people, which is our goal. Where can people find you?
anywhere and everywhere at Sam Heaney, HEA anyway.
Okay, you can find me at Fabulous Brianna, FabulistBreanna. Again, thank you for hanging out with us. We'll see you in 2 weeks in your time, many more weeks in mine. Bye.
See ya.